welcome to this training video on therapeutic communication, core dimensions, and helper implementation. I'm Mark Brennan, Project Director for Community Support Training at the Missouri Institute of Mental Health Continuing Education Division in St. Louis, Missouri. And before we get into the core dimensions, I just wanted to briefly summarize basic communication model, which I think we all are familiar with, but I just want to set the stage for further discussion down the road here. You're all aware that there are elements of interpersonal communication: sender, receiver, message, channel, and context. And all of these methods that we're talking about here, these things that we need to be paying attention to, are just there to help us understand the difficult process we have in communicating. We as human beings have the capacity to use abstract symbols to manipulate them as a way to communicate. And these symbols, which are language, are culturally dependent. I think that's important to understand. And also, they are there for us to help each other understand what it is that we're wanting and needing. And so this basic communication model, sender, receiver, message, channel, and context, is there to basically underpin further discussions down the road in terms of core dimensions of therapeutic interaction and helper implementation. So now we're going to be talking about what are the core dimensions of therapeutic communication. And there are four such, four elements of therapeutic communication. Those are empathy, respect, therapeutic genuineness, and being concrete. I want to ask you for a minute, just take a minute and think about the last time you had an interaction with somebody where they shared something of import with you. How did it make you feel? If you felt something about what they were sharing with you, then you've just demonstrated empathy, because empathy is really understanding someone's experience through your own emotional and feeling state based on what they're saying. If you've demonstrated empathy, then you've understood what someone is trying to say to you from their own feeling state. Empathy is extremely important in terms of developing a trusting therapeutic relationship with the clients you provide service to. It's going to be very important then to kind of hone the skills of empathy. Well, how might you do that? Well, I think if you look through your own internal states, try to figure out who you are as a person, what your strengths and weaknesses are, you're going to be better able to understand a frame of reference from someone else's viewpoint. So empathy is basically walking a mile in someone's moccasins. It is an essential skill in relationship building as well. If you can develop empathy and understanding of where someone is coming from and relate that in context to what they're telling you, that person is going to be more apt to trust you with their feelings than if you weren't able to do that. So empathy is the ability to understand someone from their own internal frame of reference, using your own internal frame of reference. And it also is essential in the development of a trusting relationship. There are three stages of empathy. The first stage is you're being receptive to even entering the person's frame of reference. There has to be a willingness on your part to listen to what someone is telling you, even if what they're telling you is very difficult to hear. We all have stories to tell. Our clients have stories to tell. Some of them are sad stories. Some of them are violent stories. Some of them are stories of desperation or of great kindness. You have to be willing, be receptive to hearing what someone is telling you. That's the first stage of empathy. Secondly, you have to have an understanding of the use of the person's language, how they're communicating. Some people use language that's very basic and elemental. Some people use language that's very abstract. You, as the individual, the helper, the provider of care, are the first point of access for clients. So you have to demonstrate not only a willingness to go where that person is taking you emotionally and in their language, but you also have to try to understand that from their perspective in their own use of language. You must also be able and be willing to truly understand what the person is telling you. So you have to understand their language. You have to also be receptive to going where they want you to go with them emotionally. You also have to make it clear that you understand what that person is trying to tell you. And that can even be with feelings as opposed to just words. Because sometimes people are telling you horrific things that have happened to them, and you may be at a loss for words, but you can still communicate a sense of empathy, either by a touch or by a nod of the head. All of those things are instruments that you might use to help a person understand that you're being empathic. Second core dimension is respect. You know what respect is from your own experience in the world. Respect is positive regard. And for our clients, respect is willingness to treat that person how you would want to be treated, regardless of what experiences they're sharing with you, where they have been, where they are going to, the kinds of information that they share. All of those things should not enter into your respecting that person. They're just basic human regard. That can get demonstrated in your ability and your willingness to empathize, to be with that person, to lend an ear, to lend a helping hand. Positive regard is where respect begins. The third core dimension is therapeutic genuineness. We're talking about being genuine. You know when someone is being genuine with you. Think of the last time you were in an interaction when someone wasn't being genuine. You can certainly tell when people aren't being genuine. There's a particular way that they act that's different than when they are being genuine. And we all don't like it when we're with someone who is being fake or phony or disingenuine. I think it kind of puts us off when we're around someone who is putting on a show. So what you have to do is you have to meet this person, this client, as a genuine human being. That doesn't mean that you cross any boundaries. That doesn't mean that your information is more important than that individual's. What it does mean is that you're willing to accept this situation, this relationship, in the loving and trustful way that it was intended. Being genuine also allows you then to set boundaries out of respect for you and for that individual. You have to be concerned with understanding this person's boundaries and having them understand your own. And if you're genuine in your interactions and you're respectful and you have empathy, then you're going to be the best kind of helper that you can be. Finally, the core dimension that we want to talk about is being concrete. And I think if you just go with that term concrete, you think probably of something hard and fast and solid. And literally, being concrete is those things. It's just being down to earth, being as clear as possible in terms of boundary and limit setting. It's telling the client what they should expect from your relationship and your interaction, and it's telling them what you should expect that they do. So being concrete is actually defining roles, setting boundaries, identifying limitations, and helping that person understand the various roles that are involved in this thing that we call therapeutic interaction. There are three important functions of being concrete. The first one is that it helps you, as the helper, maintain a focus in the interaction. There's an immediacy to being concrete that's very helpful in the therapeutic interaction. Secondly, it helps to foster accurate understanding in what is being said. And it allows the client to talk about what they're experiencing and ask for and to develop specific interventions on what is actually being shared. Third, it encourages the client to attend to specific problem areas that might be identified through the interactions that are going on. So in summary, there are four core dimensions: empathy, therapeutic genuineness, respect, and being concrete. Once you practice these with someone, either a coworker or clients or a supervisor, you're going to be better able then to implement some of the skills that we're going to be talking about next in the helper implementation portion of this videotape. There are 3 elements that we're going to talk about in terms of helper implementation: listening, structuring, and responding. Obviously, the most difficult of these 3 is listening. It's very hard to listen. We oftentimes can hear what people are saying, but listening is a very difficult process. Just in general, it's hard to listen. But specifically, if we're involved in a lot of different activities and we have a lot of different clients that we need to be providing services to, listening is a very difficult thing to accomplish. One of the ways that we try to help people learn how to listen is to quiet the internal noise. That means pay attention to what's going on in your internal state and try as much as possible to close those down. To be an effective listener, then, you have to have your needs taken care of. You can't be hungry. You can't be considering your own thoughts and feelings at the particular moment. When you're trying to listen to a client, you have to kind of shut those things down and pay particular attention to what they are doing. That requires an attentive stance, leaning forward, concentrating on what the person is saying, hearing what they're saying in terms of their words, but also hearing what they're saying in terms of their feelings. Listening is a very difficult process, but one that is essential in terms of implementing the core dimensions. Also, in terms of listening, you have to try to suspend judgment. Hearing what someone is saying, their story, if you will, like everyone has a story to tell, listening without judging gives you as much information as possible so that when you begin problem solving or working towards solution with the client, then that is the time to begin thinking about and helping the person go down a path of decisions. When you're actually initially beginning conversation with a client, that's when you need to listen without judging, get access to their story, their information, how they're feeling about what's going on. The second part of implementation is structuring. What do we mean by structuring? Structuring is actually helping the client listen to their own words and the feeling states behind it, and also helping them frame what it is that they're telling you. It's also helping that individual know what his or her responsibility is in their interactions with other people and the situations that they found themselves in. So structuring is a more formalized process whereby you're helping the client identify key factors, feelings, situations, and helping them understand responsibility that they have and other people have in those interactions. Structuring assistance provided through the helper's behavior and modeling rather than verbally. As a person who's involved in interacting with a client, you don't have to say the word structuring to help them understand what you're doing. You can begin structuring the interview as a way to role model what it is that you want that client to do and to think about. Verbal structuring is only necessary when the client has no idea of what the roles and responsibilities are for him or her or for yourself, or they don't understand what's going on in their internal state. That's a more formal process that you might be able to use with someone who has a psychotic disorder, who might be actively hallucinating or having delusions, or someone who's very confused and not knowing what to expect. So structuring is a process whereby you formalize particular interactions to reach a particular point for the client. Now, responding, obviously, is almost self-explanatory. Responding is a method by which you take information that the client is giving and you are responding either to the feelings that are behind what they're saying or the content. And so those are two specific roads that you can go down, and they're different roads. If you respond to content, you're primarily going to be responding to what the person is saying. And if you're responding to what the person is saying, then you're going to use what we call paraphrasing as a way to do that. And paraphrasing is just restating what you heard the person say. If you're responding to feelings, then you're responding to particular fuzzier, more abstract concepts. Using statements like, you feel blank because blank, would be an example of responding. For example, if a client was saying to you that they're unhappy because they're not fulfilled in their life, a response to feeling statement might be, you feel sad because you're unfulfilled. That would be a responding to feeling statement. Responding to content is just very specifically responding to what the person has said. And again, a way to do that is to paraphrase, to use your own words to feedback what you heard them saying. Responding helps clarify. It helps get the client to a specific point. It also can help make confusing statements or abstract statements more concrete, which is what we were talking about previously. There are accepting responses, and there are clarifying responses. You can reflect responses to content, as I said, or to feelings. Accepting responses are just basically what we call minimal encouragers. And they are things like, I see, I understand, tell me more, I'm with you. Those kinds of statements. We use those all the time. Obviously, if you're responding to content, you're going to be a little more specific, as well as being specific in terms of responding to feelings. But those minimal encouragers are kind of the stair steps that get the person talking a little bit more so you can gain access to information. Responding to content also goes beyond just the simple minimal encouragers. This is the point at which you're trying to peel an onion, so to speak, and get down to different levels of meaning. Clarifying statements can involve things like, when you said blank, I understood you to mean this. Is that an accurate statement? How did you feel when so-and-so said this to you? Or, tell me what you felt when you said that your voice was raised and that you felt like you wanted to hit someone. Tell me what was going through your mind when that was going on. Or when you were talking with me about being happy that so-and-so called you, express how that might look in terms of feeling. And so you're trying to get more specific in information. It also lets the client know that you're hearing what they're trying to tell you without too much analyzing involved. Again, a good statement that tells you you're responding to feelings is to say, you feel blank because blank. And that will help you kind of formalize your interactions with that person and try to get them to talk more about their feelings. Clarification is another example of trying to get to a deeper level of meaning. Clarifying can take the role of using words, your own words, to try to help that person understand what it is you heard them say. You're getting down to the meat and potatoes of the conversation. Sometimes people use very vague language to try to get you to understand something. So clarifying is a way in which you use your own language to involve the conversation, the client, more in an in-depth conversation. You're pointing at specifics, maybe using a word the client used, a particular movement, or I noticed when you said this, you did that. Help me to understand what that means. All of these things are clarifying examples. We talked about being concrete, and I can't stress that enough, that when you're trying to get a person to tell you exactly what it is they're feeling or thinking, you want to use statements that are trying to specify a particular place that you want the client to get. Finally, we're looking at interpreting, and this is basically jumping from getting specific information to maybe using your own words or your own experience to try to interpret for the client what it is that they're saying. They may or may not have any understanding of what is going on right now. They may be asking you for some understanding. So here is the point at which you take a leap of faith, so to speak, and you begin putting your own spin on what they've said. This comes with some responsibility on your part. You cannot interpret without asking for feedback. Feedback is extremely important. When you interpret, you're interpreting tentatively. You're not telling the person what you believe that they're saying. You're putting an interpretation on it and asking if that's accurate. And that gets back to this whole feedback loop that we were talking about before. When you're concrete, the person is either going to say yes or no, that's accurate or not accurate. When you're using interpreting, the same thing is true. You need to do that in a tentative way. When you interpret, you're basically asking the client to tell you whether you're accurate in that interpretation or not. There's an immediacy in that interaction as well. The person, if they think that you're way off base or way off the mark, you'll begin to see some nonverbals. They may be shaking their head, either yes or no. That's going to tell you whether you're close to what is the truth of the matter. They may actually say, no, you've got it wrong, or yes, you understand. These are all elements that are involved in that interaction that's going to be helping you move your understanding along with the client of what their situation is or what they need to be involved in doing next. And I just alluded to the idea of immediacy, which is, I think, very important in terms of the interaction. You're immediately involved in this interaction with the client. You're needing to look at the verbals, the nonverbals, how they're responding to your being concrete, to the empathic statements, to the feeling statements, the responses to not only feelings, but actual content of what is being said. All of these things are part and parcel of the therapeutic interaction. Now, what we've talked today about is really a three-part process. We began talking about the just basic communication model. That led us to discussing therapeutic interaction, therapeutic communication, what we call the core dimensions. And then finally, the helper implementation. That's where the rubber meets the road. All three of these elements are extremely important in the work that you do. I would ask that you practice these skills with a coworker or a supervisor. This information is very important information as a springboard, but direct application is where you're going to have the most growth. With that, I'll say good luck and good health.